VikesNow, Dustin Baker, the July 14th edition. I'm here with Will Goodwin. How are you, sir?
Dustin, I'm doing great. Good to see you today.
Excellent. So tell me, you're new to this space. You started writing for VikingsTerritory over the past couple months. Give us a little biography for our viewers.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been writing for VikingsTerritory just for a couple months, and um, I live in the Minneapolis area, as most Vikings fans do these days. And yeah, I've been living here for a couple years with my wife and kids, and have a small little house and backyard up here. And I grew up in the northwest part of the state, more north central, the Brainerd Lakes area. So been Minnesota my whole life, and came down here for school, and I've stayed.
Ooh, excellent. Okay. And your Vikings, how long they've been your team?
Really my whole life, which isn't terribly long. But really I became a Vikings fan in 2009 when Brett Favre came over. I remember vividly the helicopter and the car ride and the
Mm-hmm.
the whole ESPN thing. And my first Vikings jersey was a Brett Favre number 4 jersey, and yeah, I've stuck since then.
Yeah, it was. I remember that. Let's see. I was 25 years old, and just how surreal that like footage of driving
Yeah,
in the black SUV. God, that was weird. All right, so I brought
yeah,
you on the show to ask you about 6 or 7 pertinent 2022 Vikings topics. Are you ready?
yes, sir.
All right, so I want to know right out of the gate. We can set the tone here. What is your primary concern about the 2022 Vikings?
Yeah, that's the big one. Um, it's got to be all the unknowns, right? And I know there's more than one unknown, so in a way, it's more than one primary concern. But I think it's just the unknowns that come with a new regime. And there's a lot of excitement around the new front office, new coaching staff. But with that is a ton of question marks. Like Kevin O'Connell has never coached before as a head coach. He comes from the McVay coaching tree, which is exciting, and that coaching tree has had success. Um, but he's never done this role before. And on the defensive side, Ed Donatel brings a wealth of knowledge and experience, and he's had a ton of success with Denver, especially last year. They were top 5 defense, if I'm not mistaken. But our defense has been bad the last 2 years. So does one coach and a few new players really turn that around? So just too many question marks, I think, is kind of the main concern I have.
So it's kind of like, what if the honeymoon ends sharply in September and
Yeah,
the summer of optimism was kaput.
exactly.
Yeah. I've thought about that too. I think it's just natural Viking cynicism. And I think that there's also this idea that because O'Connell is everything Zimmer wasn't, Zimmer was old, O'Connell's young, O'Connell's
Yeah,
offense, Zimmer was defense, Zimmer was stubborn, O'Connell's like this ultimate collaborator. I think we just assume it's going to be better. But to your point,
exactly.
the games actually have to take place and they got to be good for this to be worthwhile. Let's go into some of the training camp, which starts in 10 days when rookies report. I don't know if you'd call it a battle, but I want to know. So Cameron Bynum shined last year in a few
Yeah.
games. When the lights came on, they said, "You're up. Harrison Smith's out." He played like a maniac in a good way. But now they got a safety named Lewis Seen, who they drafted as a fruit of a trade with the Detroit Lions. We're kind of, I guess, jaded that rookies under Zimmer didn't necessarily guaranteed out of the gate starting jobs. Who starts week 1 at free safety, Lewis Seen or Cameron Bynum?
Yeah, that's a good one. At this point, the way I see it is, you talked about Bynum in last year. He'd be the safe bet, right?
Mm-hmm.
He showed you a little bit. He showed you some flashes. He has some NFL experience. He knows what it's like when the lights turn on. But in the same vein, Scene also has a little bit of that playing in the SEC, right?
Yeah.
In that national champion and all that. So he's played in probably bigger moments than Bynum has in a lot of ways. I think with this new regime that we've already talked about a little bit with O'Connell and KOC, and with KOC and with
Mm-hmm.
Kwesi, I see them to be more in a go for it mode, right? They brought back Kirk, they brought in Sedarius Smith, they made some of these moves that signified, okay, we're going for it. So in that sense, I see Scene getting the start week 1 because it's a little more spicy. And Scene is, he's the energy bringer, he's the hard hitter. Um, he's got that championship pedigree already. So I see him getting the start week 1. I think Bynum's going to get a ton of playing time. I think
Yeah.
all the safeties are going to be vital to the defense, but I think that's what I see Scene starting week 1.
Yeah, because you start, if it's not seen week 1 or in September, you start to ask yourself, if not now, when? Because Bynum's not old at all. So either
Yeah.
Scene is going to marinate waiting for Harrison Smith to retire, which would be an odd forecast for a first rounder. So, but at the same time, it's kind of a raw deal for Bynum because he did everything that he
Exactly.
should as a mid-round draft prospect, that he, in theory, should get a sequel, because, I did what you asked of me and I looked damn good doing
Yeah.
it. But I agree with you that Scene, probably out of sheer draft stock, will be the week 1 starter. What about this pivot away from Zimmer, the embrace of Kirk Cousins and Kevin O'Connell, old coworkers in Washington in 2017? How much can the QB1 improve with Zimmer out of the way?
I think that's something that many Vikings fans are A, split on, and B, have a lot of hyperbole about. I think, the general theme is, Kirk is going to become MVP now that he has an offensive coach. The way I see it is, I think his stats will be relatively similar. I think in some senses he's not going to improve in, the statistical ways. I mean, he's been a 30 touchdown, sub 10 interception machine most of his career. It's that whole thing. The quarterback rating's always at or above 100. What I think will improve though is his aggressiveness. We saw glimpses of it. We saw glimpses of it last year. I keep going back to this Packers game. I think it was week 11 when we beat the Packers um, at home, and he had multiple game-winning drives in the fourth quarter. That was a game where I saw the aggressiveness come out and pay dividends. He threw almost 2 interceptions in that game that were called back.
Mm-hmm.
But in some ways, and I wrote about this a couple weeks ago, I actually see that to be a benefit of, I think he's going to probably throw a few more interceptions this year, but I actually think that will be a sign of good things for the Vikings because he'll take more shots down the field. He'll have a coach that trusts him. And I think because of that, and I'll get to the, my projections of the Vikings season in a bit here, but I think we will win more games with this new scheme, new offense. And so I think in some ways it will appear as if Kirk Cousins improved because we will have won more games. But I think stat wise, it'll be about the same.
Yeah, stat wise equivalent. And then the ever precious QB record, if that spikes by 2 or 3 wins, then all of a sudden he looks like a mini rock star because the team in theory will be going to the postseason. Another throw that comes to mind that's glossed over because it stopped the bleeding was the throw to KJ Osborne against the Steelers. Remember that when they choked the first half lead away? And then it felt like this thing is going to be one of the biggest collapses in regular season NFL history.
That was a big one.
Yeah, and then he tossed that bomb to Osborne, which ultimately won the game. But I remember thinking that one, like, yeah, that's what we'd love to see when it's, just almost like a track meet, like throwing caution to the wind. We get it. You're going to throw some more interceptions, but let's have at it.
Yeah.
All right, so more training camp stuff. I was on a fantasy football podcast July 3rd, and these gents were talking about drafting Dalvin Cook, which is fine, but make sure you handcuff him with Alexander Mattison. And I said, depending on when your draft is, you might want to monitor Vikings training camp because some believe Mattison could be cut in favor of Kene and Wangu or Ty Chandler. Do you think Alexander makes the team and as the RB2?
It's a great question. So I don't see this as terribly complicated. Madison's been productive.
Mm-hmm.
He's been a solid backup for the last couple of years when Dalvin Cook is either injured or needs a couple snaps off, what have you. So I don't see this as a terribly complicated question. I think Madison will continue to be RB2. I think Wangwu still needs to show us more out of the backfield. I think he has big playability, and I think he will definitely, and I hope he gets time on the field. Third down situations, screens, what have you, and he's obviously going to be in the kick return game. So I think he's too explosive to not, get touches. But I think Madison hasn't done anything to fall off the ledge to warrant being, cut from the team even. I think maybe he's RB3, but I would still think he's going to be second behind Cook.
Okay. So for you, Madison not making the 53 man is poppycock. Like it's
Yeah.
clickbait kind of.
I see it as clickbait, but
Yeah.
I can be proven wrong.
No, that's all right. Free agency concluded arguably a couple months ago. The Vikings are still waiting on rookie contract signatures from Andrew Booth and Ed Ingram. I think there's some sort of second round log jam caused by somebody. When they do get those guys in house, they should have about $9 million or so in cap space. Do you foresee the team making another big free agent addition like Ndamukong Suh or Kyle Rudolph, Eric Ebron, or do you think this is what we got?
Yeah, you got to my punchline there. So I think Ndamukong Suh, he's the front page headliner.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm Kwesi, I focus elsewhere.
Okay.
I don't need the attention of Suh. I don't need his attitude. I don't need his personality. And also at the stage of his career, I don't think he's going to be productive enough for what you're going to have to pay for him.
And then also the
think
fact
JC
that he wasn't good last year. His PFF
Yeah.
score was 49.4, and he's Ndamukong Suh, so nobody cares. But continue.
Yeah. I think JC Treader is interesting. I think he's one that, he never practices because he's always hurt. But he would definitely help the interior of the offensive line, which has obviously been a big pain point for the Vikings. I don't want to see any more Aaron Donald up the middle sacks. Thankfully, Hakeem Hicks is out of the division, so that helps.
Yeah, it does.
But I would actually say, you mentioned Eric Ebron. That was the guy that I was going to point to.
Okay.
I think, age compared to Rudolph, he's a little younger, so that's a benefit. The Vikings just need another pass catching tight end. It's Irv Smith and then no one. And so, many people, I think, I've heard this in different forums. Mackie and Judd were talking about how there's, the O'Connell system doesn't need pass catching tight ends. They use running backs and receivers. I disagree. I mean, you see Tyler Higbee, he was a very vital part of that offense last year. So the Vikings need to have pass catching tight ends. And I think Ebron is an interesting one that they should take a long and hard look at.
I think there is an eternal shine on him, at least for these conversations, because A, he was a first rounder, and B, he somehow caught 13 touchdowns in 2018.
Yeah.
And so we know that's in his body somewhere. And because Adam Thielen is the red zone target after Rudolph left, it kind of feels like, well, if you're not going to get Rudolph, and you might as well get Ebron, unless you have grand plans for Johnny Munch or Nick Muse. All right, two more things on the docket. Let's see here. Give us your overall temperature on Kellen Mond. He's going to get a fair shake for once to become the team's QB2, even though they re-signed Sean Mannion. Do you, before the draft lead up, his first season, or even now, what's your temperature on him? Is going to be good, or is he just a mad? Because like you talked about a couple times in the show, split avenues. I've talked to Paul Charchian and Ben Lever who are like, yeah, he ain't it. And then you have dudes that are like, yeah, he just needs time. What do you think?
Yeah, I obviously don't have the access of Ben Leber, but I have a higher opinion on Mond than maybe many Vikings fans do. And I think maybe where that took off a little bit was pre-draft in 2020, when Chris Sims came out with his QB rankings ahead of the draft, and he had Mond ahead of Trey Lance and Justin Fields. Still fourth out of those, top six from that year, but that was saying something because people were talking about, those guys top 5 picks or whatever. So I think that's where my interest was piqued on Mond, and I started paying attention to him a little more at A&M and seeing what he had done and seeing what type of player he was. I think, and I know you wrote about this a little while ago, he has traits that link himself to kind of the modern NFL quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
The shiftiness, the playmaking ability. he's not, Kirk Cousins accurate, but he has accuracy. His accuracy improved every year at A&M. So I think I'm really curious about this year. My temperature is, if we're going to look Minnesota summer wise, it's probably in the mid 70s, a little too humid, but it's pretty good. I think he's going to be a good player. I'm interested to see how this year plays out. I think you talked about this too. He needs to be QB2. And we need to give him a fair shake here. I'm also just interested to see what it's like because, Zimmer's opinion, he's not a QB whisperer. He's not an offense whisperer. So I think just dismissing Mond after last year is a little bit immature and premature.
Yeah, on the QB2 part, said it a few times. If he can't dethrone Mannion for QB2, then everything you just said, my friend, is false. Everything that Charchi and Lever said is correct because we know what Mannion is and isn't. And so all we're asking is for the third round quarterback to win a QB2 job. We ain't asking for much. And if he can't do that, not that he's a rotten guy or anything. It's just like, well, he's probably not going to be a contingency plan for the Vikings.
Yeah.
And that's all he really is right now, because this is the only reason to be talking about a QB2 battle is that if this season, the honeymoon ends like you spoke of, and it goes another bullshit 8 and 9 year, then you got to figure out, all right, can we roll with Mond when Cousins is gone, or do we get the next rookie quarterback? All right, let's end it on a all-encompassing note. What you know about the team now, we don't have Ndamukong Suh, Eric Ebron, Kyle Rudolph. We don't have any big injuries, and all the contracts are basically settled. Predict the Vikings win-loss record for this season.
Yeah, this kind of ties into the first question, right? Because I was talking about my concerns of all the question marks and everything. I think there might be a little bit too much hope baked into this, but the way I see it is we have a pretty soft schedule. 9 home games, only 7 true road games. The neutral site against the Saints in London. I see that as a very beneficial thing. Our division is always weak, so we get 4 games against bad teams. I see it as an 11-6 team. And I could go game by game and break down why I think that, but I think 11-6 is where they'll be.
You know what? If everything stays the same, and I'm teasing it too early, that's what I'll settle on, because 12-5 really sounds like I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, and then 10-7. I just think that there's so many names on the roster, and if there is semblance of depth, I think nestling in at 11-6 would be fair. However, the last 2 years, I've pegged them for 11-5, and I was outlandishly wrong. They settled into absolute stale mediocrity. So my win-loss history as of late is not pristine. So that's why it feels like each year I'm saying the same thing, but perhaps with a new coach. Well, listen, you talked about the game by game part. Maybe you can come back on in a few weeks and we can do that, because I'm sure some viewers would love to hear the game by game breakdown, and especially that first one out of the gate. It's a trial by fire, my man. Given that head coach, his virgin experience is, by the way, you get to play the Packers at home. For the first time in Vikings history, the Packers play with fans in attendance at home. That's never happened before. And they've been doing this for 61 years. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
All right, sir. Well, I appreciate you joining us. We'll have you back on probably right at the turn of the calendar in August. Any closing thoughts?
No, I think it's an exciting year. I think there's reason to be optimistic, but there's also reason to be cautious, as we know as Vikings fans.
Well, yeah, you've balanced both adeptly, and I appreciate it. All right, that's all we got. And Skol, baby.